Hello, and thank you to the Ministry of Economic Affairs to allow me to speak today at this online event. For me, the topic of circularity, circular economy, however you want to phrase it, is perhaps one of the most exciting things we're seeing in the industry at the moment for so many different ways. It's an agenda which I think brings a lot to the table, and it allows organisations of different size to really drive change. It's going to impact us at a personal perspective, a personal level, as well as a commercial level as well, challenging us to move away from our existing model of take, make, use, dispose, to one that drives real change and commercial success for all businesses of all size, with the lowest possible impact as you start to use the principles of circularity. In this conversation, throughout the webinar today, throughout this event today, you're going to hear many different perspectives. But what's important to remember is the benefits, the opportunities of circularity don't sit alone. You need to add to the mix the other kind of market drivers that are going on around us as well. So when you add things like IoT, you have a powerful combination which helps us to move from this product to service to experience economy, which is, I think, when this agenda really comes alive, making us really think and really challenging ourselves in terms of what we can do to drive the change, supported by standards to help us on this agenda. My name is Martin Townsend. I am the Global Head of Sustainability and Circular Economy at BSI. I hope you know BSI already as the organisation that writes some of the foremost standards around sustainability, but also helping all sectors in all different ways. At the end of the day, our standards are market best practice. It's new knowledge to the market, and we are here to help and support you regardless of size, regardless of sectors. When you add those standards to our assurance solutions, which bring transparency and confidence to the user and to the wider market, it's a very powerful combination. So I'm looking forward to speaking in more depth with you. So let's get on with the presentation. I want to put a lot into the next 15 minutes. I think just talking about 8001 without setting the context would leave you wanting, I suppose, in terms of understanding how it can help you. So I want to cover a number of issues in the next few minutes or so. I want to talk about a changing world and how that looks in terms of all the sectors, I suppose, which make up the world we live in. So what does Industry 4.0 look like as we move forward? I want to reflect a little bit in terms of how the world has moved from an extraction to a product to a service economy, and in that process, I suppose, the experience economy, I suppose, which is the next in that journey. How we need to really drive market transformation, and what point and where do we need to make these interventions when we start to think about circularity. A little reflection point then on how BSI's philosophy is shaping that agenda. And then to end, I really want to kind of spend some time talking about 8001, which is, I know, fundamental to what you want to hear from me. But most important to share with you now, I don't want this to just be a monologue. It's very easy with webinars for it just to be individuals talking to you for a set period of time. If we're going to make the industry change, if we're going to help rethink our products and our services in a changing world, we need to have more active conversations. And so on my last slide, I have put my email address, and I hope I can help you. I hope you can help me understand what changes we need to see as the markets are moving. So all of that in the next few minutes. So where to start? And I mentioned just a few seconds ago about Industry 4.0. Different countries have been through this cycle of innovation or change, I suppose. But it doesn't matter where you are in the world. We are seeing a radical change at the moment. We have seen very labour-intensive, very resource-intensive processes. We've seen how that has changed in terms of modern production lines, how industries have changed with the very low-tech sort of communications that happened in centuries ago. And then when we think about the 1970s, we think about digital manufacturing, we think about electronic and digital production and digital machines in the 70s. That now seems very old hat to where we are today. And so it doesn't matter which industry you sit in, we are seeing machine learning and AI, smart factories, the Internet of Things, the use of big data really taking over our philosophy. And I think that is important just to share, because that sets the context. As we are a much more digital world now, circularity sits really well within that process. There was a greater level of transparency. Consumers now can look and understand what is the product they want to buy at a consumer level. Businesses are asking more information based on feedback, understanding what is a good product, what is a good service that we have. And so this Industry 4.0 that we live in today is really fundamental in terms of making circularity mature and driving change in our marketplaces. And if I try and summarize that last slide down, we've gone through a process of change in terms of extraction and creating products to now creating products and services. And I think circularity is so important in sitting in that space. And if I give you a couple of examples just to kind of tease you with what I mean, I've worked in many industries in my working career, and what I'm seeing more and more is that organizations now don't sell things such as roofing products, they sell water tightness. How can you make sure that a building is watertight? And actually within those products that will make up that membrane, you put chips which will sense the change in moisture. That can give information about when that material was laid, who it was laid by. And so you can then start to actually improve your products based around that feedback loop. Other examples, we don't necessarily have lighting systems, we just sell lighting levels within a building. And that includes things like circadian lighting to make sure that there is a strong relationship between the people in the building and their productivity. You don't sell HVAC systems, you sell temperature. And that is part of this experience economy. How do you make the consumer, the occupier, the individuals within a building more productive? How do you make sure that you're thinking about your profits and those business models you create? How do you commoditize that relationship between a product and service? And this conversation has really been very much down to individual leaders shaping and changing certain organizations, but we're now in a different world in the sense that in a post-COVID world, we need to think about how we are driving change. How do we make sure that our profit margins are healthy for us as an organization to survive? How do we ensure efficiency in organization performance? How do we get closer to the client to make sure that they want to come back again and again and again because we're providing the right service for them at the right time, a service that they really appreciate, and it's one that they want to repeat. If we're looking at market transformation, circularity really sits in that space around market transformation and business performance, and that's where we are today. And the most important thing to share here, I suppose, is when we think about circularity, it is about making sure that we design our products, our services with it in mind. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the principles later on. But how we design a product, how we think about it, how we make sure it's repairable, how we make sure that it can be broken down or reused, if it comes to its end of life, that needs to be considered right at the planning phase, right at the design phase, because the longer you leave that process, the higher the costs. So this is a change of business philosophy. It's a change in the way we design, the way we work, and that applies to all sectors across the world. So let me just kind of put this in the frame from a BSI perspective. We work in all sectors. And with regards to sustainability and the work that we do around circularity, how do we make sure that we achieve low cost, we achieve low impact, we make sure that we're supporting that market transformation, which we talked about just a few moments ago. And in that process, for me, from a BSI perspective, there are 5 fundamental things which we try to do as we develop our standards, as we look at our assurance solutions, as we work with you to improve your business. And you can see those on the screen, but let me just walk you through those. BSI as a standards organization has a great wealth of knowledge that we tap into. Our committees are made up of leading experts across the world to write our standards to help you as a business improve. And it's about taking that industry knowledge, taking that industry science and using it responsibly to create best practice, to create standards which will really help people improve. Fundamental to driving change is about making sure that we have within businesses good governance. As I mentioned earlier on in this conversation, things are changing. The world is changing, and transparency, accountability of organizations is becoming paramount, and people are becoming much more aware of the role of good governance in terms of ensuring businesses survive. Assurance, the way we audit against set standards, is fundamental to making sure that we have confidence, the consumer has confidence, that the clients that you provide your products and services to has confidence. Equally important in this process of change is if we are making sure that we're creating good products and services, it is about economic success. Quite often conversations about sustainability and circularity are often seen to be green conversations or greenwash. This is about making sure that we can really ensure businesses grow economically successful, because if they are economically successful, they can ensure that those profits can go back into good design and good products and supporting clients to improve. And then at the top of that diagram that you see in front of you, it's about making sure that we share best practice. We create a healthy and just society by making sure that that knowledge is shared well. And the net result of that is making sure that we reduce the impact on the environment. If we look at many sectors across the world, they're great consumers of raw material, yet we don't have endless limits in terms of the resources within our world. So how do we make sure that we really allow those resources to be used for future generations? We use them sparingly in the right way. And those fundamental principles underpin many of our standards. So let's talk about 8001. The first thing to share with you, I suppose, is the fact that not all standards are equal. So some of our standards are guides, some of our standards are specifications, and they all work in different ways across a business landscape. So I just wanted to share that with you a little bit. So 8001 sits in the guide category, and it's really good at helping businesses understand the fundamental principles that they need to be considering as part of business change. I've also included a couple of other examples on this slide just to kind of give you some context. So you're probably very aware of 14001, which was a standard produced by BSI. And I see it to be a thematic. I see it to be one working around a theme, and that theme is environmental management. And if we look at practical applications, BS 2012-1 is another good example of where we've written standards which are really driving change in terms of how business improve. 2012-1 is about sustainable events. How can businesses ensure that they're running an event that is sustainable? And they all work in different ways, but 8001 is a really good conversation with C-suite, with senior people in an organization to embed principles in terms of how that organization can be sustainable and successful. If I look at some of the principles of the circular economy, which is all included in the standard, there's a couple that I just really wanted to tease out, just to kind of share with you to help you understand some of the things that 8001 will help you achieve. Innovation, it comes back to that point. If we're going to improve as across the world, I suppose, but improve for you as a business. It's about supporting innovation, constantly looking at your product, looking at your service, and understand what you can do to improve. How can you make sure that the components are reusable? How can you make sure your supply chains use those products in the most effective way? And in that, it is about collaboration, making sure that you, the product manufacturer, you working with your client to understand their needs and their supply chains, ensuring that that process of collaboration is fundamental and at the foremost sort of thought in your mind. Transparency, as we talked about a few moments ago, transparency is key here in terms of ensuring that you understand your product, you understand how it could be reused, recycled, and in this process, how do I optimize the value in terms of what I'm doing in terms of that supply chain on my client? How do I make sure they get value for money in the best possible way? And circularity has many, many thoughts that basically bring it together, and you'll see this in 8001, the document. Each one of those bubbles is an hour-long lecture in its own right, and I'm more than happy to kind of talk to anybody who wants to listen about how we can really drive some of this thinking in terms of, it might be cascade systems, it might be about biomimicry, it might be about understanding in terms of cradle to cradle or redesigning in terms of regenerative design. All of those are incredibly powerful tools which 8001 looks to try and support. But I actually thought this diagram, if I was just limited on time, is probably the best one to try and help you understand what we're trying to achieve. In the past, we've always had linear thinking. It's been about extracting, making, using, disposing, a linear process where basically it's about putting products into waste, end of sort of use waste. And what we're trying to do now is rethink that in terms of a sharing economy, thinking about products that where you can extend life, or you can reuse or repurpose or refurbish. How do we make sure that we create recycling processes which are either closed loop recycling or basically open loop in terms of cascade? If we can achieve those goals which 8001 set out, we can minimize the inputs and we can minimize the loss or the amount of waste that's created. It's a powerful tool to help you understand how you can improve as a business. And as my 15 minutes is almost up, I just wanted to kind of prompt you to think even more. If you think about this changing world we live in, who would have thought a decade ago that the world's largest taxi company has no taxis? If we think about large movie houses that have no cinemas, if we think about software vendors that don't write apps, the world is changing. Circular economy is about challenging your way of thinking, making you act differently, making you more responsible in terms of the impact you might have, making sure you as a business really are economically successful. And in being successful, you minimize the impacts you have on the environment. And as I said at the start, and I really do mean it, I really want to make sure this is a conversation with you, the delegates here, and it's not a monologue of just 15 minutes of me talking to you. So if you have questions, if you feel that BSI can help you improve your business, my email address is on the screen, and I look forward to receiving your email. So thank you for that.